Okay, is everyone ready?
Yes.
Okay, great. This meeting of the Coventry Town Council will now come to order at 6 PM. Roll call. Ms. Ludwig?
Here.
Mrs. Shockley?
Here.
Mr. LeBlanc?
Here.
Mrs. Lima?
Here.
Mrs. Dixon? Here. Mr. LeBlanc, please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and then describe the emergency evacuation plan. Please stand.
Oh, sorry, I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. Emergency evacuation plan.
Evacuation plan is out those doors to the right.
And left. Okay, may I have a motion to adjourn into executive session at 6 PM for the following: closed pursuant to Rhode Island General Laws 42465A5 for discussions or considerations related to the disposition of publicly held property wherein advanced public information would be detrimental to the interest of the public, and closed pursuant to Rhode Island General Law 42465A1, discussions of job performance, character, physical or mental health of a person or persons, specifically for the council to discuss the position of police major. May I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. May I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Roll call. Ms. Ludwig?
Yes.
Mrs. Shockley?
Yes.
Mr. LeBlanc?
Yes.
Mrs. Lima?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon, yes. 5 yeas, no nays. The motion passes. We are now in executive session. We will adjourn into the room right to our right. Thank you. Good evening, everyone who's joining us this evening. May I have a motion to adjourn from executive session at 7:07 PM?
So moved.
May I have a second?
I'll second.
Roll call. Ms. Ludwig?
Yes.
Mrs. Shockley?
Yes.
Mr. LeBlanc?
Yes.
Mrs. Lima?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon, yes. 5 yeas, no nays. The motion passes. May I have a motion to seal the minutes of the executive session?
I'll make the motion.
May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Roll call. Ms. Ludwig?
Yes.
Mrs. Shockley?
Yes.
Mr. LeBlanc?
Yes.
Mrs. Lima?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon, yes. 5 yeas, no nays. The motion passes. Members of the public, the town council met in executive session for the following. Closed pursuant to Rhode Island General Laws 42465A5 for discussions or considerations related to the disposition of publicly held property wherein advanced public information would be detrimental to the interests of the public. And two, closed pursuant to Rhode Island General Law 42465A1, discussions of job performance, character, physical, or mental health of a person or persons, specifically for the council to discuss the position of police major. For item number one, a discussion took place, no votes were taken. For item number two, a discussion took place. The item will be discussed later in the meeting. Before we move to the next agenda item, I would like to ask the council to stand for a moment of silence for Denise Thermuda, who was hired on July 8th, 2002, and was with the town in the building department through December 31st, 2021. The council expresses its condolences to Denise's family and friends on their loss. Please stand for a moment. Thank you. You may be seated. Agenda item C2, approval of the town council meeting minutes for February 28th, reference pages 4 through 11. May I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion.
May I have a second?
Second.
Madam Clerk, did you receive any corrections for February 28th, 2022?
Yes, and the corrections were made.
Thank you. Roll call to approve the amended minutes for February 28th, 2022. Ms. Ludwig?
Yes.
Mrs. Shockley?
Yes.
Mr. LeBlanc?
Yes.
Mrs. Lima?
Yes.
Ms. Dixon, yes. 5 yeas, no nays. The motion passes. Agenda D1, licenses for discussion and/or action. Ratification of a vote that took place on March 28th, 2022 during public hearing for the transfer of Class B liquor license, victualling, live show entertainment licenses, Lake House Tavern LLC doing business as the Lake House, 2260 Flat River Road, to High Five Kitchen LLC doing business as Flat River Tavern. May I have a motion to ratify the vote that took place on March 28th, 2022 for the transfer of the license?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you. May I have a second?
I'll second it.
Roll call. Ms. Ludwig?
Yes.
Mrs. Shockley?
Yes.
Mr. LeBlanc?
Yes.
Mrs. Lima?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon, yes. 5 yeas, no nays. The motion passes. Agenda D2, Blackstone Herbs and Coffee Bar, 710 Center of New England Boulevard, new live show entertainment license and outdoor expansion of premises, reference pages 12 to 19. May I have a motion to approve the license subject to final approval by the fire marshal at the Hopkins Hill Fire District?
I thought this was being tabled. No?
It was changed.
Oh, sorry.
I'll make a motion. Yeah, I'll second it.
Thank you. We have a motion. We have a second. Mr. Renucci, are you here this evening?
Yes, I am.
Oh, thank you. Would you come forward and just tell us a little bit about your business and what you've been doing to address the concerns made by the planning department in a letter addressed to the town? It was addressed to the plan. It was addressed to the planning from the planning department. Yes, but it was from the zoning. This is reference pages 18. This letter was addressed to the town clerk on March 31st, 2022. So welcome to our meeting. And we're happy to have you here this evening. So tell us a little bit about what you've been doing. Tell us a little bit about the business and what you've been doing to respond to the comments that were made.
Okay. The business is a coffee shop that we're trying to turn into more of a martini bar. We're trying to bring live music to the area. Right now we sell coffee, food, and CBD items, as well as our alcohol that we now have. We're trying to bring like an outside area for seating and dining, as well as live music. We did have a concern with planning and zoning for fire department and any sort of emergency vehicles to be able to get to both sides of the building. But I did address that with the fire marshal, and they were okay with us shutting down that side of what we used to have as a drive-through. We're going to close the drive-through for the summer and try to open that up to expand the indoor seating to now outdoor seating. Like I said, try to, hold some sort of live events and concerts and things like that.
So I'm happy to know that you did address this with the fire marshal. So the motion for us this evening is to approve the license subject to final approval. That means written confirmation by the fire marshal at Hopkins Hill Fire District that he is completely satisfied with the, I guess you say amended plans that you have.
Yep.
All right. Questions by members of the council? Mrs. Shockley.
Hi, thanks for coming tonight. I'm just wondering, as far as the noise, which is the only thing that the police referenced, what would be the hours that you would be planning on, and how would you plan on making sure you stayed within those ordinances?
Well, I'm not, to be honest, I'm not 100% sure what the noise ordinance is, but we'll stay within it. We were planning on being open till maybe midnight, depending when our liquor license is. That's something I'm also not 100% sure of. We don't have hours yet. We want to make it through this process before we came up with hours, but we are in a location that doesn't have neighbors. So it's not like we're bringing a concert venue to a neighborhood. There's no neighbors. We have Home Depot and Walmart as our closest neighbors, and then there's nothing across the street. So potentially if our liquor license is till 1 a.m., we'd like for Friday and Saturday to be able to, utilize those hours and bring some sort of nightlife to the Coventry area.
Thank you.
Any other questions by members of the council?
I just want to make a comment on page 12 of 35 of our packet. It does list the Blackstone Urban Coffee Bar, but it says outdoor expansion for 1 day only. That shouldn't be there. I just want to make sure that the paperwork is.
19, that one.
No, page 12 out of 35.
She has 1 day, 317.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
sorry. Yes. I didn't hear.
That's from 2 years ago. 3 years ago.
Right. It shouldn't be there. It's part of the application. I just wanted it to be accurate.
So would you please clarify, this is not expansion of premises for 1 day only, because that's what we see on this paperwork that we have.
Correct. No, I'm looking for summertime, probably until October, November, until the weather breaks, would be when we expand out that way. And then, once it's cold, we'll obviously, remove it.
Okay, so let's set a date so that we have clarity and there's no confusion. So set a date for us as to,
Let's say, hopefully we have nice weather and we can make it till mid-November, November 15th.
mid-November,
I
November
can only
15th.
hope, right?
Right,
We can all only hope.
we can only hope. So we're going to say that this would be permission or permit for outdoor expansion of premises license until November 15, 2022.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So the motion on the table is to approve the license subject to, I would say, written final approval by the fire marshal of the Hopkins Hill Fire District. And that would be till November 15th, 2022.
Yes.
Okay.
President Dixon.
Ms. Ledwick,
So are they going to have to come back every year for this?
that's what,
So that way we're putting the November 15th on. Is that usual though for every outdoor license that we do?
I believe your annual license is renewed every year
Okay.
because it's an outdoor liquor license and live show license.
Okay. Thank you.
okay, Mr. LeBlanc.
I'm not exactly sure if this is a question for Mr. Marchant, but let's hypothetically say the music's a little loud and there's the neighbors don't like the music. What would be the process to fix that situation?
The sound ordinance would be enforced by the police department. So complaints would be directed to the police department. They'd contact the owner and resolve the issue.
Okay.
And I'd like to just add, in addition to that, as the local licensing board, you have the authority to bring the applicant before you on a license violation at any time.
Great. Thank you. Just wanted to clarify.
Okay, are we ready for the vote?
Oh, just one more.
Certainly,
So-
Mrs. Lima?
How often do you anticipate having live music outside?
I would say just the weekends, Friday and Saturday. This is definitely something new for us, but if we could go 3 or 4 days, I really don't see an issue being where we are. If we were in a neighborhood or if we were on Tile Gap, I could see, us, messing with neighbors, but because we're so secluded right there, I'll try to utilize as much as we can as for outdoor. But for now, it'll just, even be 1 day a week until we, figure out how it's going to all work,
Okay.
Okay, we ready for the vote? I'm going to repeat the motion because we modified it in some ways. It's a motion to approve the license subject to written final approval by the fire marshal at the Hopkins Hill Fire District to November 15, 2022. May I have a second? We did a second, but it was not modified before, so it's,
I'll do a second.
Thank
to
you.
that motion.
okay. Roll call, Ms. Ludwig,
Yes.
Mr. Shockley,
Yes.
Mr. LeBlanc,
Yes.
Mrs. Lima,
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon, yes. 5 yeas, no nays. Mr. Manucci, congratulations. We hope that you're very successful
Thank you.
with your business.
I appreciate it, guys.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming this evening. We know you're very busy. Thank you. Agenda E1, reference page 20, appointment of a member to the Coventry Parks and Recreation Commission. Resolution is page 20. May I have a motion to appoint Jason Martin to the Coventry Parks and Recreation Commission?
I'll make
I'll
a
make-
motion.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Any discussion? I did confirm with Mr. Martin that he is still interested. We interviewed him a few weeks ago and he's still interested in being on this particular commission. Okay, roll call. Ms. Ludwig,
Yes.
Mrs. Shockley,
Yes.
Mr. LeBlanc,
Yes.
Mrs. Lima,
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon, yes. 5 yeas, no nays. The motion passes. Madam Clerk, please inform Ms. Blumenthal that we have added another member to the commission. She's here this evening. You have one more. You're ready to roll. Thank you. Agenda E2, ratification of the police major's contract for the Coventry Police Department, reference pages 21 to 25. May I have a motion to table this motion to obtain additional information for the council?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, roll call. Ms. Ludwig,
Yes.
Mrs. Shockley,
Yes.
Mr. LeBlanc,
Yes.
Mrs. Lima,
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon, yes. 5 yeas, no nays. The motion passes as tabled. Agenda E3, ratification of resolution to support Senate Bill S 2295 pertaining to waters and navigation, inspection of dams and reservoirs. Reference pages 26 to 31. May I have a motion to ratify the resolution to support Senate Bill S 2295?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. May I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Any discussion?
Can we possibly have legal counsel give an explanation of what this bill is and what the changes are? It's pages 28 and 29.
Yes, so this basically allows the Department of Environmental Management to assess administrative penalties for failure to comply with an emergency action plan. The added language is in the packets. It adds section F and G to the existing state statutes. Every dam owner and operator must comply with emergency action plans that are issued by the state in the event of things such as hurricanes, other weather events that impact on the safe operation of a dam. This adds basically it reinforces an enforcement mechanism that administrative penalties for failure to comply with emergency action plans can be assessed against dam owners.
Thank you. Any other questions that members of the council have? You ready for Mr. Shockley?
I apologize. There's just been a number of different bills in the past. Did this at one point have amounts in it that have been taken out? Because it just says penalties. There's no
I think that there were draft legislation. There's a draft legislation that had a specific penalty amount. This is not. This is the actual legislation. It's not a sub A. Some legislation, when it is proposed and when there are different amendments to it made at the State House, they issue sub A's, which is just a way of saying an amended version of the proposed legislation. This is the actual bill SS 295 that exists. I think what you're referring to is there may have been an earlier draft proposed that had a specific dollar amount. I think that I would say that has been removed by Legislative Council, and this is the actual legislation.
Does that answer your question? Okay, excellent. Any other questions, comments? All right, roll call. Ms. Ludwig,
Yes.
Mrs. Shockley,
Yes.
Mr. LeBlanc,
Yes.
Mrs. Lima,
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon, yes. 5 yeas, no nays. The motion passes. Agenda E4, resolution approving the transfer from the town of Coventry to the Coventry School Department for cell tower revenue budgeted by the school committee in the amount of $74,000 for fiscal year 22. Reference pages 32 to 33. May I have a motion to approve the resolution?
I'll make a motion.
May I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Discussion. Mr. Marchand, would you like to speak to this resolution, please?
Yes, certainly. So this resolution is simply authorizing the town to increase the appropriation to the school department in the amount of $74,000 to representative of the cell tower revenue that they budgeted for, but was not included in the appropriation when the budget was passed.
Any other questions that members of the council would like to ask about this resolution? Ms. Ludwig?
Mr. Marchand. So I believe there was some sort of meeting to review this. And I know the next proposal is going to be for the second year. So just in general, the 2 years that we're discussing tonight are ones that were on previous budgets presented by the school committee. Is that what we're expecting to continue seeing for this year's upcoming budget?
To answer that, I'm going to start with where Lisa and I started. Director Mills and I were unfamiliar with the history and practice. And since the school administration had requested this cell tower revenue, we started with looking at the budget and whether or not it was appropriated. And when it wasn't, we said no. And then we asked for documentation of, is there some agreement or contract or requirement that it be appropriated? And none was forthcoming. And so the expectation at this time is to, rather than go back and forth as to whether it's owed or not, to simply make the transfer to make them whole, at least in their eyes, for the previous fiscal year 2021 and the current fiscal year 2022. But going forward, we have stated that it will be built into their fiscal appropriation next year, so it will not be called out separately as cell tower revenue. There was some discussion at a meeting last week as to whether that would be a good idea or not. They were concerned that not having it called out separately, they would forego the increases in cell tower revenues from year to year. So this year it might be 75,000, next year it might be 80, and the next year 90. But we also pointed out that by putting it into their appropriation, it becomes part of their legal maintenance of effort where the town can't take it away. And if cell towers become obsolete technologically at some point, if it's in their appropriation, they will continue to get it forever. So it's just a policy choice as to how you want to recognize these funds. Since these cell tower contracts are with the town of Coventry, it comes to the town as a revenue and does not go to the schools directly. And without any documentation on the history, we can only see that there was a practice in prior years of transferring those funds to the school administration.
Okay, and then my second question is, Have we verified that we actually are getting the 70 or 74,000
Yes.
or whatever the number is?
Yes,
Okay, so that money is actually coming in.
we do.
I'm just curious if you know this. Why would that number increase? Usually most contracts would basically be the same number every year to us. So I'm just curious why it might.
So on these
increase.
longer term cell tower leases, they have annual COLAs figured in. They may go up by 3% a year or something. We do have changes in users and new contracts that come up from time to time. So that could be another reason for an increase.
Okay, thank you.
And also, should there be an increase, Ms. Ludwig, the town council always has the option of passing a resolution that would increase the amount. Mrs. Lima,
So are we going to put something in writing that governs moving forward, whatever is decided, whether it's built in or whether it's a separate line? Because it would appear that these resolutions are just about these 2 fiscal years. So this doesn't cover us going forward on how this is handled. Because I just don't want us to get in this situation all over again.
That's a good point. These resolutions are just about for the years that they pertain to. In a budget coordination meeting last week, I set the expectations of what the town manager's recommendation would be for the budget. However, that's still subject to the town council's ultimate policy decision and how that gets recorded in the record, either as part of the budget process or the final budget that's adopted. I'm not sure what the mechanism would be for memorializing it other than having it in the minutes.
I mean, could it be something as simple as the cell tower policy? I mean, the cell tower revenue policy. I don't know where that would live, but I don't know. As long as we can't complain that this wasn't in writing before and then not putting it in writing going forward.
Well, I think that's the difference, because we wouldn't need a policy to say that it is now part of the appropriation, because we don't break out the appropriations for any department based on the revenue. It's not like all the revenue for building permits stays in just the building department. It all comes in as general revenue for the town, and then we build a budget to balance the overall revenues and expenditures.
I guess my question is, if you came in Ben Marchant 2.0 comes in 15 years from now, you're not here, and has the same question you do, what are they turning to solve this, to answer this question, instead of having this discussion and having to do this whole process?
Well, they would look at the practice. If it hadn't been transferred for years, that would be one indication. Another would just be the contracts with the cell towers and whether those revenues come to the town or to the school. You know, one of the points that we made in the conversation was, had these been school cell towers, they would have cut the deals and contracts directly with the cell tower providers, and the money would have always gone straight to them.
Yeah. I just want to make sure we've got something in writing or some formal paper trail, so we have this memorialized.
Mrs. Lima, that's a point well taken, because we've had problems in following the paper trail. It gets lost, or it doesn't exist, or we don't know where to look, or we don't know who has that past history. So point well taken. And we should discuss that again. So thank you for raising that issue. Yes, Mr. LeBlanc.
Question for Mr. Marchant. If we leave this revenue separate, and I'm not saying I want to change resolutions tonight, but if we were to leave it separate, would we be able to say in future years, we'll give you the cell phone tower revenue, but you need to earmark it for maintenance of your buildings?
No, you wouldn't be able to do that, because the Title 12 of the state statute states that the town cannot tell the school committee how to spend their funds.
But this isn't, if we leave it separate and it's not part of their appropriation though. I just didn't know if we could.
So you could earmark it for specific purposes. I don't know administratively how you would control it once you release the funds.
Okay.
Unless you were to withhold it until they provided invoices for us to pay on their behalf.
Okay. Just wanted to ask a question. Thanks.
Okay, another good question. Any other comments or questions by members of the council? Are we ready for the vote? Okay. Roll call. Ms. Ludwig?
Yes.
Mrs. Shockley,
Yes.
Mr. LeBlanc,
Yes.
Mrs. Lima,
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon, yes. 5 yeas, no nays. The motion passes. Agenda E5, reference pages 34 to 35. Resolution approving the transfer from the town of Coventry to the Coventry School Department for cell tower revenue budgeted by the school committee in the amount of $70,000 for fiscal year 21. This reference pages 34 to 35.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. May I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Mr. Marchand, you want to speak to this one? This is past year.
This is the same condition as the prior one.
Okay. Any other questions by members of the council? Last year, we did not provide this money, so we're catching up. Roll call. Ms. Ludwig,
Yes.
Mrs. Shockley,
Yes.
Mr. LeBlanc,
Yes.
Mrs. Lima,
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon, yes. 5 yeas, no nays. The motion passes. Agenda F, motion to remove Travis Bamford from the Coventry Historic Preservation Commission. May I have a second?
I'll make a second.
Thank you. Discussion. The reference for this action is in Home Rule Charter, Chapter 15.06, relating to membership on a board or commission. If a member or a board, if a member of a board or commission has not been attending meetings and is recommended for removal, then we do that. This allows for people who are alternates to move up into that position. In some cases, because there has been a lack of attendance by some members of a commission who were appointed, the committee or commission has not had a quorum and they have not been able to meet. So this allows us to maintain full membership on each of these commissions. Any other discussion, Mr. Marchand?
That's accurate.
Mrs. Shockley?
So I believe that we've had trouble reaching both of the members under this consent agenda, but I know at least one of them had been very engaged. And I do wonder if there would be a way of finding out how they soured, or if something came up, or if there's something that we could do. I believe that we have tried to reach out. I'm just, it's concerning. Either I'm concerned for welfare or I'm concerned that there's something that's of issue. So I just wanted to make that clear that, there are concerns when people who were very engaged immediately lose engagement.
Mr. Marchand?
I would be reluctant to share hearsay, but suffice it to say that we did not receive any communication by multiple means and over multiple months, despite many people trying to reach out and find these people.
Any other question? And I did ask the town clerk to send letters. Did you send the letters, Mrs. Ambatrano?
Yes, I sent emails.
Thank you. And that's was many times we have tried to reach these people. We've done a very strong effort to reach them. It takes a long time to recruit people. We don't want to have to replace them, but without people attending meetings, we don't have quorum sometimes and we want to conduct business. So the first one is to remove Travis Bamford. We have a motion and a second. Roll call vote. Ms. Ludwig?
Yes.
Mrs. Shockley?
Yes.
Mr. LeBlanc?
Yes.
Mrs. Lima?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon, yes. 5 yeas, no nays. The motion passes. Agenda F2, motion to remove Joshua Clement from the Coventry Land Trust Commission. May I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you. May I have a second?
I'll second.
Again, the reference for this action is Home Rule Charter, Chapter 15.06, relating to membership on a board or commission. Any discussion, any questions by members of the council? Ms. Ludwig?
So similar to what Councillor Shockley was asking before, there's been multiple attempts to reach this individual by members of the council, by the clerk's office, and by multiple members on the committee over 6+ months. So unfortunately, this is where we are.
Okay. Roll call vote. Ms. Ludwig?
Yes.
Mrs. Shockley?
Yes.
Mr. LeBlanc?
Yes.
Mrs. Lima?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon, yes. 5 yeas, no nays. The motion passes. Agenda G, Town Council updates. We are accepting applications for a moderator for our financial town meeting scheduled for May 24th, 2022. Last year, Jane E. Guzenda was our moderator. Anyone who was a moderator in the past is eligible to apply. The town council does encourage an open process for all positions for which it appoints people, so all are encouraged to apply. So please Send your interest in this position of moderator for May 24th, 2022 to Ms. Ambatrano, our town clerk, as quickly as possible. Update on the performance audit. We are close to the point of a public presentation on the final report. We expect it within the next meeting or two. Please do attend the presentation in April. Our meeting will be live and on Zoom. So we're all waiting for that final report. We're also accepting applications for the Comprehensive Plan Advisory Committee. Please contact our town clerk, Ms. Ambatrano, for an application. We did get another applicant who is now on the planning committee from District 4, so we're happy to add another member. We're still looking for people from Districts 2, 3, 4, and 5. We have quite a few from District 1, but anyone in the whole town who wants to apply, please do so. Okay. Town manager update. Mr. Marchand, do you have any updates?
Yes, the Charter Review Commission has been meeting weekly since January, and they've been having some lively discussions about many aspects of the charter. These meetings are held weekly, Wednesday, 6:30 p.m., live in person at the town hall and via Zoom. Zoom has been a great way for people to participate. They welcome public comment. We have created a space on the town website for Charter Review Commission where we have 2 questions to the public, asking them to weigh in on some issues so that they can get a sense of what the community wants. And so we encourage people to visit that site and visit their meetings. And if you've missed the meetings, they are also recorded on the town's YouTube channel, which our IT intern has graciously helped us make playlists for, so it's easier to find what you're looking for.
Thank you. All right, agenda H1, town budget. This presentation is required by our charter. The agenda, town manager submits capital improvement program, 5-year capital improvement program, annual capital budget with recommendations to the town council. This is per town charter 8.13. The town manager presents budget message and recommended operating budget to the town council. No votes will be taken this evening. The vote by the council will take place on May 2nd, 2022. Prior to that vote, there will be advertisements in the local papers and public hearings on April 25th and on Saturday, April 30th. The financial town meeting will be May 24th, and the referendum to approve a budget will be May 26, 2022. Attendance at our town council meetings to discuss the municipal budget and the Coventry Public School budget has been very, very low. We need an informed electorate, so please contact your council members and ask questions. Mr. Marchand?
Thank you, Madam President. So this evening, I'm going to try to adjust the screen. I am pleased to present to you the town manager's recommendation for the 2023 fiscal year budget for the town of Coventry. This is comprehensive of the town and Coventry Public Schools. The theme for this year, I would say, is a commitment to quality community services. And I will describe that more as we go on. When we completed the budget for the current year, fiscal year 2022, we had a number of goals that were laid out in terms of opportunities to reduce costs and improve performance. So the goals that we completed were the implementation of a fleet management plan, where we are reducing the costs of purchasing vehicles by going to capital or vehicle leases and getting a newer fleet with less maintenance issues. And that's been working very well, with the exception of we can't get the new vehicles that we want delivered because of the shortage due to logistics problems and parts, but that's the auto industry across the country. But that has been a successful start. We had a goal to implement a performance audit, which President Dixon has already mentioned. That has been completed, and we're just in the final stages of getting the final report, which will be presented hopefully later this month. We began an initiative to update and do a new comprehensive plan. The current comprehensive plan was adopted in 1999, so it's well over 20 years old, and we are just at the beginning stages of that. The consultant that we've selected, the beta group, has a very aggressive schedule, and they hope to present a final comprehensive plan recommendation in May of 2023. So that's just a year away. And we are looking for volunteers to help serve and shape the discussion for how we want to see Coventry grow in the next 20 years. And finally, we did a new strategic planning process. That was a group effort with the management team and the town council to go through each of the departments to look at what the critical needs are and what's holding the town back. And the new strategic plan has outlined some key priorities that are included on the town's website under the town manager's page. Some of the goals that we did not get accomplished, but we're still aiming for, is a completion of a community survey to get public input on their expectations and level of satisfaction with town services. Our goal is to invest in infrastructure and technology, vehicles and equipment, and invest in facilities. Everyone's certainly familiar with the discussion in the last year about school facilities and their need. That need has not gone away, and we hope to revisit this issue in June, hopefully after the budget vote is completed, and discuss how we can put a more concerted effort into our facilities for the future. So one of the top priorities in the strategic plan was improving the financial strength and position of the town. This year's budget proposal achieves this by, one, funding the state mandated investment in school maintenance of 3% of the school's operating budget. Two, by funding the town's capital improvements plan by $955,354. In the last 5 years, I can total on one hand how many dollars have been put into capital, and then the budget, that was zero. So this is a huge step forward, and I think it's important to build on that success year to year so that we can catch up on a lot of the issues that have been delayed and postponed. We do have a larger amount this year to fund the town's operating contingency. We've raised it from $70,000 to $215,224. This helps us to address issues that are completely non-planned and unexpected. For instance, we had a head-on collision with one of our sanitation vehicles that resulted in a total loss. It was not on the schedule to be purchased, replaced, and the contingency that we had budgeted wasn't enough, but we were able to put together some funds, including the insurance proceeds and ARPA funds to complete that purchase. And finally, the utilization of ARPA funds to address unbudgeted capital investments. The ARPA funds are a special revenue from the federal government that we cannot budget with since they have very specific requirements and criteria for compliance. And even if we are able to use them as revenue replacement, the rules still follow that we can't use it to pay off debt or do operating expenses for certain things, like pay down our pensions and that sort of thing. So this budget will achieve that. I did want to mention the performance audit in specific, that this was a comprehensive review of the Coventry Public Schools in all town departments, and the consultant, the Matrix Group, reviewed policies, practices, staffing, and general workloads, and they came up with over 60 recommendations in the preliminary findings. Some of those may be whittled down as we found duplicates, and there were some questions that were raised that have been addressed in the later part after the initial presentation. But we are looking forward to using those recommendations to improve our services and how we plan and manage for the future. So as I mentioned before, this is our capital improvements budget for fiscal year 23. We have 2 vehicles for the police department. We have a planned generator for the town hall, library, and Department of Public Works. Right now, when the power goes out, the building is literally shut down and we aren't able to continue operating. And this is a point that provides critical services for our residents and has been kind of in a plan for many years, but has never been advanced to being funded. The Millworks property fence was a project that the town undertook to demolish a building, and because of its proximity to the Patuxent River on Main Street or Washington, the DEM requires us to put a fence around the property to protect it and keep trash out. While the cost isn't great, it's a requirement, and we found we could fund it in capital. DEM is also requiring upgrades to our fuel systems and diesel something fluids station at Public Works, and these upgrades will help us operate more efficiently and just update the old pumps that we have. Vehicle underbody wash rack is critical for extending the life of our vehicles, especially after the salty conditions of winter snow plowing. If we can wash our vehicles, it will prevent rust and it will help prolong the life of the vehicles. An equipment brush chipper. This is a vital piece of equipment that we use after storms to clear debris of fallen trees, limbs, branches, and that sort of thing. It allows us to chip it, mulch it, and reuse the material around town after it's had time to compost. We do need an area for composting, but that is not in this CIP. We have an amount for recreation equipment, $6,500. Parks and Recreation has the category of facilities maintenance and property maintenance. For facilities, it would be new floors, roofs, repairing leaks, and building related improvements. For property maintenance, this would be more like drainage projects, parking lot, sidewalk, and field repairs that are spread throughout their parks assets in the community. And finally, for IT, we included the town website. Well, it's not a substantial physical thing. It's a substantial investment that we expect to have for more than 5 years, and will help improve the town's communications and information platform to provide more efficient services to the residents. So that's what is included in the proposed capital improvements budget for the next year. And it is acknowledged that there's an opportunity to use ARPA funds to pay for one, some, or any of these projects. I would say that I would encourage consideration of the use of ARPA funds after we get into the new year to make these funds stretch further, and that we build a level of funding for capital into our tax base. So from year to year, we can build on that and do more CIP projects. If you just were to spend it all with ARPA funds, then we would have no base with which to do capital in future years. That said, we have quite a bit of...
I just had one question. On the last slide, do we know how many cities and towns have their own underbody wash rack that they own in their DPW equipment?
5
Five
towns or
39
cities in
and
Rhode
towns.
Island
Okay.
of the 39.
All right.
So continuing, we have a much larger capital improvements plan that we could not budget. We broke it out by departments. So remaining for Parks and Recreation, you can see we have almost $2 million in other identified capital projects, investments. Some of these would have been talked about for many years, desires that are in the community that have not been realized. Others are more practical and pragmatic. We need to maintain the things that we already have that are in disrepair. So, or maybe not disrepair, but deteriorating and need maintenance.
So is the first slide things that you added in for facilities and property maintenance to have them baked into our budget?
Yes.
And this is the remainder of what we would actually need to fix these? Okay.
Yes. So in a 5-year capital plan, well, we have 5 years projected. I'm only including the things that were not budgeted that were either projected in the first year or the second year. So I am looking 2 years out here so that we can anticipate some of our more immediate capital needs. Because of the presence of ARPA funds, that the town has the opportunity to choose to move some projects forward and other projects to wait.
Question?
Sorry, yeah. So where is this an exhaustive list? I'll give you just an example. What about the lights on the fields over at near the community center? Payne, wherever.
So we do have Ms. Blumenthal here. Did the lights get into your 5-year capital improvement plan? So they were in later years, I think. We pushed them out to year 3 or 4.
Yeah, you would think it was year 3 to replace them all, but that was and to put in the budget for maintenance in the meantime, because this would be substantial, over $1 million most likely.
So is a piece of that somewhere in the proposed budget and it's year by year, or?
No. So some of these projects that are discrete, we put them entirely in year 3 or year 4. There are other pieces that are spread out where, like the police cars, we budget 2 every year. And so that it's kind of a running turnover.
Okay. And then the second question is, I guess, and maybe it's a comment, I guess I think of capital improvement as large ticket items like roads, infrastructure, big, fuel system upgrades and things like that. So is that just not on here on purpose, or is that like we have, for example, in the budget we saw from Director McGee a week or so ago, it had a line item, for example, for asphalt.
So that's a good question, because we try to separate operations and maintenance from capital. And sometimes the line gets a little blurry. And at one point I had taken out $130,000 for asphalt and sidewalk repairs and maintenance and put it in capital. And then Director Mills said, no, put it back in operations, because that's the same amount they try to do every year. And so just trying to juggle what you consider a capital project versus maintenance can be subject to some interpretation. I would also say that the accountant's definition of capital project is something that costs more than $5,000 and lasts more than 1 year. So that's how you can get really low amounts that are under 10,000 still being capital, because the useful life is going to be more than 1 year's operating expense. Really, the big ticket items are your roads that are going to be $500,000 to go a mile or 2. And that's going to be a discrete project that you do in 1 year. I know Director McGee presented in our strategic planning meeting an idea that we'd fund our roads to the tune of $1.25 million to $1.5 million a year to have at least 1/20th of all the roads done every year. So every 20 years, all the roads get done. And that's a very worthy aspiration, but we weren't able to fund it with our current resources.
Mrs. Leon.
It would be helpful for me, and I think it might be helpful for the public. Can we get a quantity associated with some of these, like 880,000? How many basketball courts does that get me? Or tennis courts? How much does that get me? How much does that get me for playgrounds? So like those three bits, I'd love like quantity.
So I have that in progress with the administrative intern that we were fortunate to have for such a short time. Mr. David Jardam finished his internship 2 weeks ago, and I'm already missing him terribly. But he put together and assembled all the different sheets to build one book that would have links and to pictures and quantities and all of the detail, so that when we have it all compiled, we would have one CIP book that we could publish online, and anyone could go on and see exactly what these projects entail and how do we get to these pretty high numbers.
Okay,
But
so
that's a work in
so Raina
progress.
doesn't have that number right now.
Well, she could probably tell us how many basketball courts.
I put it in the CIP document that I submitted. I'm sorry, I don't have it now, but essentially that's approximately 6 basketball courts, the ones that are the most, the deep lines in it, are the most dangerous in my opinion.
And then how many playgrounds is 240 get you?
So that would, if it's for this upcoming fiscal year, and then that doesn't have for me, it would be for Paris, for equipment, to replace Hunter's Crossing as well, and then to also add 6 other programs in there.
Okay, that's helpful to start, but
Yeah.
I'd love to see more detail on those.
Sure.
Thanks.
So again, it's not budgeted in this year because we couldn't fit it in, but for the playgrounds, I mean. So for Public Works, here's the street resurfacing townwide. We did talk in the strategic planning meeting about the material storage facility that is currently being operated out of the Central Coventry parking lot. The materials are taking up quite a big area, and because we don't have anywhere else to put these materials, and we actively use them as part of our operations. The annex has a section of roof that needs to be replaced. It's leaking on the northeast corner. We did talk about at the last meeting, the Upper Dam Pond Stormwater and Water Quality Project and the Tioga Lake Gatehouse replacement as part of being included in the state revolving fund for their project priority list for possible financing. And so Public Works has a little over 3 million that has not been budgeted for the next 2 years. And the school has a pretty lengthy list. They have a lot of needs. They had 7 million in CIP projects for the next couple of years. And we have budgeted 1.2 million to meet their minimum maintenance requirement, but that's just maintenance and not really going beyond for all these other needs they've identified.
Mr. Marchant,
Yes.
can you just clarify that for a moment? So these pages are what they requested as saying, like, these are all the big ticket CIP items. And if this budget goes through, that's being proposed, 1.2 million would be allotted to whichever maintenance type of upgrades, some of which may be
Right.
on
So-
here.
So I didn't list which items the school would utilize the money for because I don't know what they would do, but we would, in the proposed budget, we are allocating 1.29 million for the schools to use for maintenance. And any of these projects would need to be submitted to RIDE for approval before they would become eligible for the state reimbursement and state housing aid.
And who provided the ranking? Did they?
Yeah, I just took it from their list. I don't know that these are hard rankings, or I just listed them.
I'm just looking at the well item and thinking about drinking water and that type of thing. So that's why it's catching my eye. Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions? Okay. Mr. Malcolm?
So I did put a slide in here to just call attention to the American Recovery Plan Act. These are the ARPA funds that the town has received or plans to receive. We have received half of the 10 million that we expect to receive. We don't know when or if the other 5 million will be released in 2023, but at this point we are expecting it. And we did talk about this morning, President Dixon and I, about scheduling a session to discuss the use of the ARPA funds in a town council meeting, I believe on the 25th of April, right? So in building the 2023 budget, we have these objectives to establish a capital improvement plan and fund it, to restore funding to the Parks and Recreation Department to pre-pandemic levels, to limit the tax levy growth to below 3%, and to commit to funding the state's 3% maintenance requirement for schools, and generally maintaining the quality services in all departments and fund our contingency better. I did a cute little acronym. Our budget is an asset. Accuracy, stability, sustainability, equity, and meeting our targets is key to our budget success. So to call out the highlights, we have made several changes in town staffing per the strategic plan and performance audit. These positions include, for Parks and Recreation, the restoration of a recreation program coordinator, a recreation program supervisor, and an event coordinator. Everything that Parks and Rec does from a recreation side requires a lot of planning and organizing and being present at these activities. We have a position for Deputy Finance Director to provide more senior accounting level skills in the administration of the Finance Department, the position of Assistant Town Manager, and though not discrete positions at this time, we have identified some funds for either overtime, part-time, or temporary staff support for human resources, information technology, and the town clerk's office. And here you see the funds that have been set aside for the capital improvements portion of the budget. This is our projection of revenues, where all the funds are expected to come from to fund the budget proposal. The first line is the property tax that we have contained to 2.75% in order to provide this balanced budget. We had a big fluctuation in the motor vehicle tax, and this one is one we're still working on. We don't have final numbers on the state. And one of the problems that we're running into is that because of the transition off of motor vehicle taxes as a source of tax funding for towns, the subsequent year tax is never supposed to go up. But because it's based on the values that's established by Kelly Blue Book and other national sources, the shortage of cars has pushed the values of cars all up. And so the values go up, therefore the tax on those vehicles goes up. And so we are seeing an almost 11% increase over the prior year, even though we're not supposed to go up. But these are numbers we're given from the state, and the state's still working on how to address this dilemma. Yes.
Just to make sure I'm reading this correctly, it looks like our state aid is going to be going up by about $500,000, and the school's state aid is going to be going down by about $900,000. Do you know why in either of those?
So for the schools, it's not the state aid portion that's gone down at all. It's the miscellaneous. And we've been having a lot of we've been requesting the information from school administration about how they book their miscellaneous revenue. And we haven't gotten any of the answers to our questions at this time. So even though we see a history of much higher revenue from miscellaneous for the schools, it could be one-time revenues, it could be various things, but we don't have a clear understanding of how that's broken out from year to year and what that's comprised of.
Any information on why our state aid is going up?
Well, it's not. So this state aid includes things for all departments, including the libraries, grant and aid, and other sources spread throughout the other departments. Unfortunately, Director Mills couldn't be here tonight and explain this for you. She wasn't feeling well earlier today. So if I take a moment, I could probably see in the regular budget detail. So the major increases, okay, so some of these are pretty obvious when you think about it. We're coming out of COVID, and therefore we're seeing the meals and beverages taxes go way up. The hotel taxes are going way up. Hotel went up 40%. So we got, and then the jump in the motor vehicles. But it's mostly the hotel and meals taxes where we're seeing the biggest gains. Thank you for that.
The library is getting more state aid. The more the town appropriates for the library budget, the more state aid we get to the fund. Last year we had a little bit of a bump.
Thank you, Ms. Whedon. Any other questions on this slide? Yes.
Can you just give an example for the general government and other departments?
Yeah, so that would be our fees, fines, permits, licenses, police, planning and development, town clerk.
So I remember something Director Mills had told us. I'm sorry, I don't remember exactly when, but just taking a look at the revenue that comes in on fees and permits and such. And it seemed it was very low in comparison to other communities around us. Is that something part of the performance audit that we'll talk about, or a future?
Well, this is actually part of what we've found. As you can see, it went up by 29%. This isn't just a COVID bump. It's also the fact that the finance department has been creating revenue sheets for each department so that we can book the revenue as it comes in accurately and in a more timely manner. What we found was that in May of last year, we hadn't booked our revenue since January, and we didn't know what our final revenue numbers were until August. And that puts you in a really big disadvantage to not know whether you're going to end the year in a deficit or a surplus. And so the big push in changing a lot of our financial practices that, to the chagrin of the employees, change is hard, but we're booking our revenues accurately and in a timely manner. We're reconciling our accounts on a weekly and monthly basis rather than just waiting till the year end to reconcile it all. So we're getting more accurate information, which is helping us provide a more accurate.
So it's not necessarily that we may be charging the lowest, it's that now it's more accurate information.
Yes.
Okay, got it. And other departments, is that similar to the permits? And
yeah, we haven't gotten to all departments yet, but we're working our way through.
okay, thanks.
So that's our revenue picture. Just overall revenues are up 2.37% overall. And these numbers are subject to change as we get the final numbers in from the state, and we may have more answers as to some of the school's miscellaneous revenues and the motor vehicle tax. So, but we're pretty confident that we're close. And just to recap, everything you saw on the previous slide is reflected here. And some of the market conditions that we're facing are high inflation, market volatility, gas prices are up, now they're down, and it's very difficult to anticipate our revenues based on some of these factors. But I think we've put together a very conservative, reasonable budget that will be adequate to fund the operations of the town. So with that on revenues, we'll jump into expenditures. Any questions?
I just want to make sure I understand this sheet correctly. I'm back on summary of revenues. So it seems like general tax, so what the levy will be, comes to about $2 million as a differentiator between this and last year.
Yes.
And then the town, other than that, ends up with about $650, $1 million in other additional revenue. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Just wanted to make sure I understood.
Sure. So here's the summary of expenditures. We have a sizable increase in Parks and Recreation as we add the positions back in to rebuild the program. The police have a modest increase following their contractual increases. They're pretty stable. Public Works sees a bit of a bigger increase as we try to right size our operating budget and do more of the sidewalk and road maintenance. The general admin is up as we've added the two positions for assistant town manager and deputy finance director, and generally across this includes finance and clerk, town manager, and what am I missing? At least those three. The library and human services and planning are all pretty consistent. The library did have an increase overall. And then school funding, this is kind of the sticky one. I have a separate slide on this. After my meeting with the school administration last week, I don't think either side left terribly happy with the solutions that we had, but we didn't get any alternative suggestions. But we are budgeting for a 3% increase in school funding from the town's appropriation. However, that's going to be split between capital and operations. And mostly it's going to capital because that's what the lawful requirement is to meet the maintenance requirement. As far as their other expenditures, that would include the state funding and programs that they have. The state funding went down, and I'm not sure how their budget was made up or how Lisa exactly broke these two lines out. Overall, our expenditures are up by 2.37%. It's balanced with our revenues for a balanced budget. And this is how it's broken out in a pie chart to show that the town operating expenses are 28%. With debt service, capital, and contingency, it's another 5%. The school makes up 65% for their operating budget, and 2% goes to their capital improvements and debt service. This is the budget summary overall of town debt service, capital improvements, just what you saw in the pie chart shown in a different way. Same information. So the budget considerations for the school, and this is getting back to the concerns that were raised when the schools made their presentation of their budget on the 21st of March. Their request showed a total increase. It's actually should be 6.61%. I didn't change that after Director Mills told me, but it was $3 million over their prior year request, and the 6.6% would complete all of their operating requests and all of their maintenance requirement. The state mandated maintenance requirement was not shown as part of their request on their budget sheet. They put it at the bottom of the page. However, it is known that if this requirement is not funded and met, the town will lose its rebate of state housing aid of about $1 million. And so in order to fully fund the school's request for its operations, the proposed budget would need to increase taxes from local appropriations by an additional $1.6 million. This would exceed the maximum levy increase cap of 4% and push it to 4.93%. So to acknowledge the school's need or request for funding, the 3.09% that we're presenting is about 1.3 million for their maintenance requirement and about 220,000 for operating. So it's almost level funding them for their budget. Any additional funding up to 928,000 would be allocated within the 4% cap for the levy increase. Each quarter of a percent is about 185,000. If there was a justification to allocate more to the schools for operations. There were a few sticking points in our conversation as to whether there were justifications, explanations for how their funding has changed from year to year, program to program, school to school. And we just don't have enough information to know what's actually being done. Looking at the bond disclosure reports, my concern was there's an apparent increase in staffing over what was budgeted. And I asked why that was, and I did not get an explanation. So my feeling is that if there were positions, clearly COVID has prompted a need for more cleaning, more sanitizing, more substitutes, but it didn't address the increases in years prior to COVID. And without having the information to go on, my sense is that they have enough resources to do what they need to do until they can make a better case.
Is that your sense? Because I don't feel that the town has that. You've really laid out the town budget for us.
Mm-hmm.
And looking at what you've laid out for the town budget, I see need everywhere beyond what we can catch up with. The school's budgeted by the same citizens. So I guess I'm just having a little trouble understanding the logic of they don't really need the money they're asking for. We can basically level fund them on operations. I'm having just trouble with the logic of it.
I don't have a reason to believe. I just don't know where they're at. I
can get my head around. Like you want to understand.
I can say that of their 6% request, we can reasonably fund half of it. And the priority for the town is to meet the state requirement for meeting the maintenance. And what the school does after that is really their business. I don't know how to tell them how to do their job, and I don't intend to. But these are the funds that that we have to work with. And I think if there's a justification to be made for the additional appropriation that they've requested, we do have some wiggle room within the 2.75% to 4% if that's what the town council would like to do. So in
is that to get the town to the cap of 4% or the school to their cap of 4%?
No, it gets the entire town. To the cap.
No, I do think that we have a dilemma here because you made a statement based on information that is presented to us that they don't need the money. I really would like the school to come back and talk to us about a little bit more explanation in depth about why they need the money. We need that information. We had a budget presentation. We had a slide presentation. We have this big binder here. I'm sorry, the white binder. We do need more clarity, more information about the appropriation that they've asked for. And I'd like to see that happen before we make any kinds of statements that they don't need the money. They say they need the money. We say we don't have the documentation. We can't really sit here week after week and say, okay, they say this and we say that. So I'd like to see the school to come back and then talk a little bit more, not a little bit more, a lot more about what the need is. And more than just teachers, more than about the amount of staff they need. I'd like to see about program needs. What's happening in the school? What are all the good things that they've been able to do with the money that they've had to this date and time before we come to a vote, which will be very soon, in less than a month. We're going to have to make a very important decision about what we're going to present to the voters. And I'd like to have a clear sense that we can understand among ourselves, the members of the public and the members of the public who are not here, what is the actual need by the school. So I'd like to invite the school to come back to talk a little bit more about what the need is so that we don't make statements like they don't need the money. But I think what we're saying is we haven't understood the justification for the money that they have asked for to this point in time. And we just need to see that in more detail. Mr. LeBlanc?
I have a question for Mr. Marchant. Hypothetically, if we were to go with this presented budget, what's the contingency plan if while you are giving the school their maintenance funds, but they don't spend it on maintenance? I'm pretty sure we're going to lose $1 million, you said, of housing aid.
Yes.
What's the contingency plan on the town side if that was to happen?
So we are going to preempt the need for a contingency plan by creating a capital improvement account that's in the school's name, but will be subject to the auditing and authority of the town treasurer, Director Mills, where any expenditure of those funds would be contingent on approved invoices for capital maintenance.
Okay. And then as it relates to ARPA funds, I think there was a statement made that we're going to have a meeting at the end of this month. If we were to make changes based off of that discussion, is that enough time for you and Ms. Mills to make the necessary budget changes before it has to go to the voters or before we actually have to vote on it?
Yes. So the meeting on the 25th would be the week before the vote on the budget by the town council, May 2nd. And then it would go to the voters on May 26th. So we would be able to make the changes, assuming that you're not asking us to scrap it and start over, but that we'd be making adjustments here and there.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Marchant, just make a little more clarity. The $1 million we would lose, that's housing aid plus debt service?
Yeah, so the town gets
two parts.
The town gets reimbursement for the maintenance, and that equals about $561,000, and it gets a reimbursement of 42.8% of the debt service payments.
Thank you. Questions by members of the council? So, Mr. Marchant, could you please explain a little bit in more detail how this taking the $1,291,729 for the state mandated maintenance requirement, what's the plan? How will it work? I know you've alluded to it. Tell us a little bit more about how this would work.
So this works by not including this in their operating budget. And by keeping it out of their operations budget, one, it does not increase the maintenance of effort requirement on the town. And two, it does not add to the maintenance requirement itself because it's separate. And so keeping it separate keeps it in capital and for its intended purpose. And keeping it in a school dedicated account, it is still appropriated to the schools with the restrictions that it can only be used for capital for its intended purpose. That's been one of the hardships in the governance between the town and the school, is that the school's budget authority is independent from the town council's budget authority, and therefore any appropriations made for any reason can be changed unilaterally by the school committee. And in a case where their decisions will adversely affect the revenue coming back to the town from the state, the town has a vested interest in seeing that the schools get maintained. And the school administration has demonstrated that they will not invest in the maintenance of their schools within their appropriated budgets. And therefore, it's incumbent on the town to ensure that these improvements get made for the safety and welfare of the students and teachers.
But the downside of that is that the amount of money available for operations is less than what they're requesting, correct?
Correct.
Questions by members of the council? Ms. Ludwig?
So how do we kind of bring them back? When's our next time that we meet with Mr. Levis or the school committee? Is that in May? When is the next time we meet with them?
Well, there's a public hearing.
There's a public hearing in May. I don't have a schedule. It's not part of the budget process. When Mr. Levis left off on his budget presentation on March 21st, he did indicate that they would have additional changes and potential cost reductions. And I have not received any communication about that. So I would expect them to make a request for a meeting or share proposals or let us know what changes they have in mind.
So, I mean, this is where I'm having an issue with transparency, because we're asking for information or they're telling us something, but then it's not coming to fruition. So can we reach out proactively to Mr. Levis and Kathy Patnaud to specifically request a time for them to come back and discuss this with us? Because I don't want them to say that we didn't provide an opportunity, because we weren't in time or whatever that is. I'd rather extend an offer for them to come back. I mean, we have a council meeting next Monday. We have the 25th. I mean, can we just proactively hold time in that we still have time to possibly hold agenda time for our next 2 weeks of agenda to invite them in. It doesn't even have to be the whole school committee. I mean, I just feel like we need some more color here on the rest of the numbers here, or they're not going to have enough time to come back and make any requests or changes or anything. So I want to give them that time, but I don't want to wait on them to give them the time. Otherwise, you know what I mean? Like, let's proactively bring them in. So is that something, President Dixon, that you can reach out?
Absolutely. We've always been proactive in reaching out, and I certainly would like to continue this discussion, because this is a potential recommendation. There's no vote tonight, but unless there's some changes made, some new initiatives, et cetera, some other recommendations, this is what we'll be voting on, unless there are amendments, of course, on May 2nd. And this is a dramatic change from what was requested, with only one really discussion so far. So I'd like to see that meeting take place. Mrs. Shockley, question?
No, just a statement. I like that both budgets have CIP built in. I think that's really important for just what you said, to make sure that next year we have a chunk already built in. I'm wondering if possibly we look at the amounts, as we do have ARPA funds, and think about maybe doing less to the school and or town CIP this year. So as we're not going from 0 to 1.2 and 0 to, is it 900,000? But instead kind of splitting the baby and getting that built in, utilizing ARPA for more than just what we could have already built in. So just kind of thinking around that as I look at the budgets.
Okay, Mr. Marchand, Mrs. Shockley has made a suggestion. Comments on that, please?
I would defer to the will of the council, as that's a policy decision. And the town council might have the desire to either lower the tax rate or increase the funding to the schools, or to increase funding from one CIP to another. There's a lot of different ways you could go with this. And that's what I love about dynamic budget development, because you have the resources. And it's how you use them to the best effect that's going to make the biggest impact. And if we were to level fund the town would still be here next year. We'd get a lot less done, but we would still be doing our best to do all we could. And yeah, there's going to be morale issues and hardships if you don't have all the tools you need to do your job and make it easier. But the town has operated this way for many years, and a lot of the complaints we get are because the proverbial can has been kicked down the road for so many years that, the old adage that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and 1 ounce is 1/16 of a pound. So it costs you 16 times more to do it on the back end than it would have cost you on the front end. And while we're paying for the 16 times the price of what we should have been paying, we have to dig ourselves out of this hole. We have to overcome and pay both the cure and the prevention at the same time. And that's just going to take time to dig out of. So as far as how the town council wants to approach it, I'm happy to explore alternatives and show you variations on this town manager's recommendation. This is my recommendation to really achieve the stated goals that I listed at the beginning, to invest in capital, to have a balanced budget, to keep it under a 3% increase, and do the very best we can with what we have. And from here, I'm certainly open to any ideas of how the town council would like to alter that direction.
So I'm going to ask each member of the council to respond to Mr. Marchand's suggestion that he could explore alternatives. What are the suggestions or comments you'd like to make to that offer? Start with Mr. LeBlanc.
As I've been saying several meetings now, I would like to use ARPA funds for expenses that we see as kind of like one-time expenses, ones that, come up every 5, 7, 10 years, and use the ARPA funds to offset those expenses. We have inflation at 40-year highs. We have gas prices that have doubled in a year. Groceries are 20 to 40% higher. We have ARPA funds. I think we only have 3 years to spend them. Yes. So we only have a limited window to spend them. I am a huge fan of using those. I would like to see repaving and roads. I want to know which roads are at least projected to be repaved. I think right now we don't even have any. So I would like to use ARPA funds for that. I want to let my constituents know that, perhaps some streets in my district will get repaved. I also want to make sure that DPW has what it needs from a trash and recycling standpoint. Many times this year, we've had issues with trucks. So trash hasn't been picked up or recycling hasn't been picked up. And I want to use ARPA funds to fix those issues as well. So those are just a few of my ideas.
So I have a question as a follow-up. When you suggest we use ARPA funds for one-time projects, and you suggested some things for DPW and repaving roads, if we use ARPA funds for some of those projects, how does that affect the budget that has been presented? What changes would we see in the budget?
Yeah, there's a list of CIP that we could use the ARPA funds for. We could either take it out of the budget and use ARPA funds, or we could reallocate that I know Ms. Shockley has suggested that maybe level funding the schools isn't the right move. We could allocate some funds to the schools if that's what the town council so wishes. Or in my opinion, again, with inflation being so high and all costs being up, I'm not sure the taxpayers want a 2.75% increase right now this year. So again, using ARPA funds to offset some costs that are currently in our budget.
So those costs that are currently in the budget, the money that would be saved would then be allocated to something else, perhaps?
It's an option for the town council to decide.
All right. Ms. Ludwig, your comments. Mr. Marchand has said he could come up with some alternative plans. What's the desire?
So admittedly, I was on vacation, so I only saw this plan today. And I took a quick look through the line item attachment. I did like some of the things I saw in terms of increases in the contingency funding, since it's not really contingency anymore. We know these things are happening. I did see some funds, and they're small amounts, but it's, $5,000, $10,000 to different boards, like historic groups, EDC. So I'm liking us kind of looking at how we can allocate some small funding to those groups that are doing, community events, pride in our community type of expenditures. I do have to think about it a little bit and take a look at the CIP list. I like that we have CIP. I've said in at least one other session, I personally will not approve a budget that does not have CIP allocated. I think it's time for us to really start looking in the future. I do agree with Councillor LeBlanc that I see a few items that I would like to have considered for possible ARPA one-time funding, a few of the purchase items as opposed to like the facilities maintenance and things like that were listed, like floor replacements and things. So I would like to basically take this plan. I'd like to think about it a little bit based off of what people in my district have told me. I'd like to show it to them and get some feedback and then send my comments to Mr. Marchand.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Shockley?
So like I said, I think we're all kind of going along the same lines of whether I also want some CIP in the budget, but I don't know that we need over $2 million this year of CIP in the budget. I think getting CIP in the budget is a phenomenal feat. And that we can utilize these ARPA funds because we have them, especially because of the other current circumstances. I do like the idea of keeping the budget below 3%. And, I really respect that you not only kept it under, but not just in gas station terms, but legitimately under 3%, not at 2.99. And I think we really are trying to do as much as we can with that. I am concerned, like I said, that when I look at our town budget and our town organizations and how we're trying to build them back up, not only our facilities, but it seems as if we've been underfunding our staff for a number of years as well, when I look at what you've recommended in the budget. So I do want to make sure that we are not deciding that because we don't have information that the school is in a totally different position than we are, and they would be just fine. We did level fund the school 2 years ago and the town. I have a lot of concerns, especially with who the voters are, to be able to cut all operations. Because when you take school away, when you take what the state aid and miscellaneous, they're now negative 700 for their operating budget for next year. And we know for a fact that there are built-in costs to their budget for next year. So I do want to hear from the school. I do want more insight. I know we don't get to decide how they spend their budget, but we do have to decide what they get appropriated, and we need it to make sense to our residents. So getting more of that insight would be great, but I think my first step for really being able to take away about $1 million from this budget and reappropriate it. I know no one can get 6.6%, nor would I think that would be appropriate. But I do want to see how we can make sure that we are not only taking care of our facilities, but we're also taking care of our children.
Thank you. Mrs. Lima?
So I'm definitely a really big fan of the focus on capital improvement, where we've taken a huge stride just from where we were last year, which I appreciate. I would love to see us drive down the 2.75%, as more if we could. I brought this up to Mr. Marchand before, but to me, even in our own town budget, not even thinking of just the school, but if I see a line item that's, say, at $7,500 and it's never been used over $500, that to me should be reconsidered, or kind of going through with that kind of a fine tooth comb. I know that's not the case in every situation. You sometimes have to budget a certain amount all the time, but to me, those thousands here and there add up. And those make up percentages that are significant to what a taxpayer can feel. But I'm super committed to capital improvement. I think when you live in town and you see buildings or new things being built or repaired, it's a huge morale boost. And that's something you can tangibly see is being done with your tax dollars. Whereas before, I think you kind of pass a budget and then you don't see anything that happens that's new or different or positively impactful. So I do want more information from the schools. I want to understand, and I don't want me asking questions to be interpreted as an attack or a witch hunt. It's been said that we don't understand how school budgets work, but the only way that I can better understand is by asking questions. I want to understand, so I look forward to learning more. And I do kind of agree with the sentiments I'm hearing from Ms. Shockley about, yes, let's build into our capital budget, but maybe not to the extent that's been proposed, where, we have to remember why this funding is here. It's from once in a lifetime event that's completely put our world upside down, especially for families and anybody else who was hit hard financially. So I think we need to remember why we got this money in the first place. So that's it.
Okay, thank you. We've given lip service to CIP for years and years and years. We put money in the budget and then it comes out. There's always a reason why we can't continue to put money into CIP. So I want to see something in CIP and more than just, a couple $100,000. We need more than that. We need seed money so we can keep on building year after year. I do believe that we should use opera funds to the greatest extent possible. However, since we don't have to use these funds for, 3 years? Then we really can't use it all up because we don't know what the future holds. There may be something that's really important that we would like to use the money for. So I think we need to hold back some of that money. What the percentages that we hold back, I do not know, but I'd like to see money used, but not all of it first round. I'd like to see the budget kept below 3%. And I know we've been always accused of, we set a number without any good reason for it. I'll take the blame for that, but I always think about the voters and what they say, and we have to be realistic. We want to have a realistic budget that adds value for the voters so they understand what they're going to get for their dollar. And I think we need to set something that's very realistic, behind which I would hope every single member of the council would be able to give their full support and strength when we market this particular budget and we go to the voters and say, please support this. So I want something that hopefully all of us could support, and we could go out and say, we really believe that this is going to help our town improve, not only the municipal side, but the school side. And then I also would like to see recommendations for alternative budget proposals, especially for not only the municipal side, but also the school side. And I think that has to be done in concert in discussions with the Coventry Public Schools. We cannot do that in isolation. So I would like to see some kind of meeting set up, and I'm not really going to say who should be at that meeting, whatever Mr. Marchand believes would be the appropriate group of people, but we need to have some kind of meeting so that there could be a discussion of, okay, this is what we proposed. We know that the public schools has problems with the proposal. We have some problems with even the municipal side. Everyone knows we can't get everything that we want, but what can we do to make it all work? So, Mr. Marchand, you've heard ideas and suggestions from all members of the council this evening. And I think many of us seem to be in concert about some things at least. So I think that's all a good thing. That's a good sign. But we need to have that discussion. We need alternative recommendations because this particular path going forward, I don't see it having much hope for a number of reasons. So what could we do to start making some changes in the way we're thinking?
Well, I hope not, because with the feedback I'm getting some saying, under 3 is good. Some saying 2.75 isn't low enough. And yet we need to add more in for schools without taking capital out. So I think there's a lot of competing desires that might not all be mutually compatible. And how we get there, I really think this is a fair budget and an adequate budget from a certain standpoint. But I think we need to get creative and how we use the ARPA funds. If we were to say that this is the budget that we believe in that can get passed, but the way we're going to supplement the school's operating budget without adding to the MOE would be to mid-year substitute some of their maintenance with ARPA funds and release those funds for their operating. Maybe that gets them another 500,000 without actually increasing the 2.75% at all and using ARPA funds in that way. But it's going to be kind of a leap of faith that what we say we're going to do here in April is what we actually do in July, August of the next fiscal year. But I would really like to know what the school committee could come back with in terms of revisions to their budget proposal of what can they really do? What cuts, or did they sharpen their pencil? We don't have a baseline to compare their budget request from their earlier budget request because we got just as much information with their December budget proposal as we did with the March proposal. It was just numbers and changes without any explanation of why these cuts were made, what the difference was, and what we lost. I think in the town's budget process, it's been helpful for the town council to walk through line by line every aspect of every program budget in every department, so you see what the alternatives are and what the choices are when we decide to fund something or not fund something. We don't have that advantage with the schools, which I do hope they can provide us some insight on and provide at least some options. And that's where I come back to 2.75, I think is a good number, but I don't think it's adequate to do a lot of the things we want to do. And we might have to go up to 3.25 if that's what it takes to fund the schools and rebalance our capital and invest in their operations. We might have to reduce our capital. We can't reduce theirs because that's the minimum state requirement. But on the town side, we don't have requirements for our capital. It's just the necessity of operations. People don't like driving on potholes, so we do the best we can.
Other comments by members of the council? Ms. Ludwig?
The only item I didn't make a comment on before was about feelings of whether we should look at an increase, 2.75 higher, lower, et cetera. I do want to just make a couple mentions here. So I know that we have inflation. I know that we're just coming out of COVID. But we literally just heard from Director McGee that just to dump the same amount of garbage that we do now, and I think it was last year, we called it, it was like legal, it was like a legal hostage situation that it was like $200,000 more just to do the same services to take our garbage to the Johnson landfill. There's no other landfill in Rhode Island that we can do that to. So not only do we have to eat that 200K, but
No, we don't want to eat that.
yeah, exactly. So, so isn't it another 80K? $84,000. So I think we need to be realistic with our constituents here, that to provide the same level of service is going to cost $84,000 more this year, just because the dump has increased. And that's just one example. So for people to say, I don't know if we should consider an increase more or less, the expectation that I want to talk about with at least the people in my district is just to throw out our garbage, it's going to cost $200K more last year, $84K more this year. So give me some alternatives, not just yay or nay on this number, but if you tell me no, you don't want an increase, are you willing to go to biweekly garbage pickup? Because there has to be some sort of alternate option here if people are not going to look at the items that we're reasonably asking for. So I just want to throw that out there, because I'm not saying yay or nay or whatever to the 275 that was put up. I want to talk about it with my groups, but I want to be clear that that's the message that I'm giving to people, that they may not understand because they don't come to every one of these meetings, but just to provide the same level of service, we now have to pay all these extra things for the same thing that we did last year. So hopefully others can help reiterate that message.
It's a solid message. And I think each one of us has mentioned that in the past. So it's good to repeat it. Mrs. Shockley.
Just another note as how we look at who we give tax incentives to as residents of Coventry. There are people, our fees and registrations and things like that are going up quite a bit. So there are people who cannot afford this tax increase, and there are people who can and would. So how to look at those groups of people, a lot of people fall in the middle, but just to be able to look at, are we helping the right residents or not when it comes to how we give tax incentives?
And Mrs. Shockley, that segues perfectly into my last slide. Thank you very much. We do need to look beyond the budget. We do need to look at our next steps. And from where I sit, the priority objectives are to prepare a facilities improvement plan that looks at all school and town buildings over their lifetime. Our CIP doesn't begin to touch the schools or for the town facilities or public works or the animal shelter. I mean, if you've been to the animal shelter, please, it's an embarrassment. And we need to do a lot better. But you can't do better without a plan. And it's going to take time to put a plan into place, but I think that's where we need to go next. We need to review our asset allocations and tax structure. Right now, half of the tax stamp just goes to the land trust on every sale. Is that enough? Is that too much? Is it just right? How much land does the town want the land trust to buy up before we're done buying land? How much is enough? What do we have to maintain? None of the funds in the land trust go to maintenance. It's just for acquisition. So I think we need to look at that. The tax exemptions, who's it benefiting? Who's it hurting? And then we need to develop alternative revenue sources. Taxes is not a warm, fuzzy thing that people like to talk about or like to pay. Unless they're like me and they geek out about what a great deal they get for just a few dollars of taxes and, 24-hour police coverage, roads, parks, everything. But recreation program services can expand. And I think there's revenue opportunity there, fees for services and grants that as we build the capacity of our finance and administration staff, there are opportunities that the town could take advantage of. So that's the hopeful high note.
It's a good, hopeful high note. Other comments by members of the council? Okay, we'll turn to agenda I. Public comment. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand, be recognized, come to the podium. And if you're on Zoom, please raise your hand in the chat and the IT administrator will let you in. Is there any member of the public who would like to speak this evening? Senator Aptakis, would you please come to the microphone? State your name and address, please.
Leonidas Raptakis, 2080 New Snack Hill Road. Thank you, Madam President, members of the council. I want to just give you an update what's happening with three pieces of legislation. One of them, you passed a resolution several weeks ago, and that is Bill number 2180, which is going to be in the Environment and Agricultural Committee on the Senate side, scheduled now for April 27th, which is going to be the last Wednesday of the month. And that's the bill where it calls for DEM to appropriate a study commission for the Flat River Reservoir Johnson's Pond. So that one is you've taken action on that bill. The second two bills, one of them was already heard in the Senate Judiciary Committee with a companion bill in the same committee, the Environment and Agricultural Committee, which is going to be heard on April 27th. So 2220, which was already heard in Senate Judiciary, is the bill that gives authority to the town of Coventry regarding Flat River Reservoir, Johnson's Pond with the current situation. In the second bill, the other bill, I think it's 2181. That one is identical, almost a companion bill, but it's a bill that allows DEM to administer authority over the Flat River Reservoir Johnson's Pond. So what we're looking for is a resolution, two resolutions on those two bills, one that was already heard in Senate Judiciary and one that's going to be heard in Senate Environmental and Agricultural Committee. Those bills have not been surveyed. When I spoke to legal counsel in the Senate, they'd rather see the town council, since we had the discussion on all three bills at our legislative meeting, to propose to support those bills either your next town council meeting or before April 27th. I believe you're going to be having two more town council meetings before the end of the month. Now, DEM is working on additional amended language to strengthen both of those bills. And I've shared some emails with you and the members of the town council. So that's something for you to look at. But what is in front of you currently, which has been introduced, is the bills that we had the meeting with my colleagues in government several weeks ago. And basically that's what's happening right now. So I know on April 27th, the Johnson's Pond Association has been working to notify the residents. There's been several articles in the media already. So that is a date where members of anybody of this body or residents of Coventry, whether they live on Johnson's Pond, Flat River Reservoir, or whatever the case might be, to come up and testify, or if they can't come up and testify, is to email the Senate Environmental and Agriculture Committee. There is another bill on the House side, which Representative Nardone is working with me, and it'll be identical. So whatever we pass on the Senate side, it'll be identical on the House side. So hopefully the bills pass, and they go to the governor for a signature. Again, hopefully strengthening the hands of both DEM, the Department of Environmental Management, and the town of Coventry to oversee the future of the Flat River Johnson's Pond area.
So what I hear you say is that you would like a resolution from the town council.
On the two remaining bills.
On the two remaining bills.
On the Senate side.
2220 and 2181 before April 27th.
Correct. And I think Representative Nardone will be contacting you on the final House version to present it to you, that he either is going to be, I'm not sure if he's amending a current bill or he's going to introduce another bill regarding Flat River Reservoir, Johnson's Pond. So I'm just going to give you on my side, on the Senate side. So there's been a lot of discussion between the members of both the Judiciary Committee that heard the first bill and been talking to the chair, both chairwomen of both committees. So let's see what we can do to help the residents of Coventry.
Excellent.
Sure.
Thank you.
Any questions or?
Well, we're limited in what we can ask, but Ms. Ludwig?
Sure.
I look forward to joining you on the 27th.
Absolutely. So open to the public comment, and I think it's going to be held at the State House. There's not going to be virtual. It's going to be in public, and I presume around 5 p.m., no earlier than 5 p.m. that evening. Okay. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Any other members of the public who are here with us this evening? Mr. Lemoy?
Mark Lemoy, 34 Island Drive. Thank you for listening to me tonight. As you may know, we're actively working with the Rhode Island legislature to enact some relief for the erratic lowering and raising of Johnson's Pond water level. The impact of such activity is, not only affects us as homeowners, but also affects nearby communities. The watershed of Big River, upstream in Coventry, West Greenwich, Exeter area, downstream in West Warwick. It's not just a Coventry issue, it's a regional issue. We believe Rhode Island DEM is committed to addressing the situation, and our senators and representatives have been actively exploring avenues to provide the legislative relief that Senator Raptakis just described. To that end, as Senator mentioned, on April 27th, we will be notifying all residents of how they can testify either in person or via email, letters, correspondence to the committee, and also their local and state representatives. Also, as Senator mentioned, we're working with Representative Nardone, and he has the companion bills on the House side. Any hearings on the House side, Representative Nardone will be contacting you and probably asking for the same that Senator Raptakis is. Bottom line is we need to protect the citizens of Coventry, the residents of Coventry, taxpayers of Coventry, and the state for that matter. There are state boat ramps on Johnson's Pond. I want to thank you for your involvement on this matter and your support in the past and your future support. And have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who would wish to speak this evening? Mr. Horton, are there any people on chat who would like to speak? I don't see any. Please, if you're on chat, please raise your hand if you'd like to speak. I don't see anyone else. Okay. Agenda J, may I have a motion to adjourn at 9:05 p.m.?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Roll call vote, Mrs. Shockley? Ms.
Yes.
Shockley?
Yes.
Mrs. Lima?
Yes.
Ms. Ludwig?
Yes.
Mr. LeBlanc?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon, yes. 5 yeas, no nay. The motion passes. The meeting is adjourned at 9:05 p.m.
To reduce the budget.